Hi, my name is Min and I am your dead DM. If you're new here, it's nice to meet you, and if you're coming back, it's nice to see you again. I really missed you. It really has been a while. Today I'm going to be talking about my all-time biggest hyperfixation, Disney. Some of you may know that I absolutely love Disney. I hate Disney, I live to hate, and I hate to love. So my obsession for the past 2 years has been Mickey Mouse entering the public domain. If you haven't heard by now, Mickey Mouse entered the public domain January 1st, 2024. Feels like old news now, it's almost May. I have read many articles and watched many videos referencing articles and have many pet peeves about how this is talked about. So that's what we're going to do today. Personal background. I have an animation degree from the Savannah College of Art and Design, and I am currently pursuing a MFA degree, which would allow me to become a college professor. I give you that information not as some weird flex, but to know that I have an animation background, and that's the viewpoint and truth that I approach this topic from. All of the information I give you, I have researched and currently believe to be completely true, and my sources will be scrolling at the bottom and cited in the description. However, I'm not a lawyer. My mother was a fantastic trial lawyer for 30 years and is now a paralegal professor. I reached out to her and she gave me the following statement. I have not practiced copyright law and I have no desire to do so. She's also likely watching this video, so hi Mom, I love you. Anyway, as I was saying, I have recently returned to school to take part in a graduate program with the intention of becoming a professor. At the time of writing this script, I have just finished my first semester back at school and completed a research paper about Mickey Mouse in the public domain for my graphic design history class. Now, off the top of your head, you might be wondering how I managed to convince my professor to let me do such an animation-heavy topic in a graphic design class. And my answer to you is, the films may be what people talk about most, but advertisements and merchandise designs are also things that enter the public domain. My paper was titled, Mickey Mouse versus the Public Domain, Unmasking Misinformation with Graphic Design. So without further ado, I will relay this information to you. According to Walt Disney, the idea for Mickey Mouse suddenly appeared in his mind on a 1928 cross-country train ride. This tale was so incredibly popular that it became a large part of American lore around the genius filmmaker. However, the truth of what happened in 1928 should be far more interesting to artists and consumers alike. The article, Walt Disney Stole the Idea for Mickey Mouse Off His Friends, tells the story of a man named Ub Iwerks, and the way Mickey was designed in 2 hours in March of 1928 on standard 2-punch paper. For most of 1928, Disney and Iwerks were reeling from a great creative loss. They had been making independent films with the character Oswald the Rabbit. The copyrights of these films and Oswald were owned by the distributor company, known as Universal Studios. Universal seized all the assets from the studio, leaving the 2 Kansas City boys back where they started, needing a character. According to how animation history remembers it, Walt swore to always have full rights to his characters. Now in 2024, the world is in a stir as Mickey Mouse finally enters the public domain after lobbied extensions in 95 long years. With the lobbying to keep Mickey locked away, we have a full generation of artists who did not get to expand on the works of the generation before, as Disney and Iwerks were able to do. So, the thesis question posed is, how do we navigate using a character in the public domain while it still has active trademarks and cultural sway? And the answer is to not just look at the source films, but also the advertisements and posters surrounding the media to get a full sense of the character aspects that belong in the public domain. I believe in answering this question, it is important to look at the background of Iwerks and Disney. Iwerks was an employee at Pesman Pubin Commercial Art Studio in Kansas City when he met Walt. The two, through the studio, worked with clients of Gray Advertising Company as graphic designers by creating advertising for local theaters and farm supply companies. History records the two men advertising themselves as a package deal. Iwerks was a phenomenally fast and flexible artist, while Disney was a creative visionary with a remarkable talent for salesmanship. After their first attempt at setting up their own studio, the boys went to work at Kansas City Film Ad Company. There was an interesting shift in this period for film advertising. Originally, film posters were drawn by hand on glass slides. These glass posters would be projected onto a theater screen. However, by the time Walt and Ub were getting their feet in the door, the company was experimenting with stop-motion, animation, and live-action ads. When Disney was ready, he drug Iwerks with him on their next adventure out to Hollywood. The two set up a new animation studio in Hollywood, and their cartoons were distributed by Universal Pictures. This sets up the interesting hypocrisy in history. Despite Disney and Iwerks doing all of the work and creating their character Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, the distributor owned the rights. Much as if you create a cartoon for Disney now, Disney owns the rights to your characters and the showrunner does not own the rights. Universal decided they could cut Walt out and fire him, retaining the rights to Oswald and sending the two Kansas City boys back to square one. 3 Mickey Mouse films were created in the year of 1928, beginning with the silent film Playing Crazy on May 15th. As the title suggests, this film features the debuting characters of Mickey and Minnie Mouse flying a plane as silly mishaps befall the pair. The following silent film, The Galloping Gaucho, was released on August 2nd and featured Mickey as an Argentinian gaucho. This cartoon also debuts Pete the Cat, who appears in the later, most famous film, Steamboat Willie. The third film of that year debuted November 18th, and the inspiration behind the film's creation is a compelling underdog story. Walt's studio was on the verge of failing due to poor performance of the 2 previous films. This led Walt to take several creative risks. In 1927, The Jazz Singer featured the first full-length motion picture that featured synchronized recorded music and lip-synchronized singing and speech. This technique had not yet been used for animation, and Walt was willing to give it a shot. No one knew at the time whether it would work, or if it did work, whether it would win over an audience. According to Disney, the test screenings results were unambiguous and completely unanimously positive. The soundtrack was Turkey in the Straw, performed by Green Brothers Novelty Band, with Disney performing the voice of Mickey Mouse. The name Steamboat Willie was a play on the Buster Keaton film Steamboat Bill Jr. And with that, the short was ready for theaters. Steamboat Willie debuted at Universal's Colony Theater in New York City on November 18th. The film was distributed by Celebrity Productions, and the initial run lasted 2 weeks, earning Disney Studio $1,000. Steamboat Willie was played before the independent film Gang War, starring Jack Pickford and Olivia Borden. While Gang War has become a lost film no longer existing in any studio archive, public archive, or private collection, Steamboat Willie became Disney's international claim to fame. The following year, 1929, Playing Crazy and The Galloping Gaucho would be re-released with sound as well. Let's cut back to the modern day. Mickey now officially belongs to all of us, but in January there was an interesting trend as media boomed over Steamboat Willie's entering the public domain. The BBC's article summarized it well for contemporary artists.
Their images are now available to the public in the US after Disney's copyright expired. It means creatives like cartoonists can now rework and use the earliest versions of Mickey and Minnie. In fact, anyone can use those versions without permission or cost. US copyright law says the rights to characters can be held for 95 years, which means the characters in Steamboat Willie entered the public domain on January 1st, 2024. Those works can now legally be shared, performed, reused, repurposed, or sampled. The early versions of Mickey and Minnie are just 2 of the works entering the public domain in the US on New Year's Day.
A Times article delves a little further into the story of Disney lobbying extensions.
Disney has fought to keep its copyright of the famous cartoon character as long as possible, lobbying the US government to extend copyright protection before it was originally set to expire in 1984. Many lawmakers agreed, and in 1976 the law was changed to allow owners to retain copyright protections for the duration of the life of the author, plus an additional 50 years. In 1998, Disney once again successfully lobbied along with other entertainment companies to extend copyright protections to life of the author plus 70 years, or a maximum of 95 years.
I noticed a trend. All articles make sure to note that the version of Mickey that most people know and love will continue to exist under copyright. For example, any cartoons published now in 2024 would projectively not enter the public domain until 2119. The BBC's article from before even gives the statement from Disney's company.
Disney warned that more modern versions of Mickey are still covered by copyright.
We will of course continue to protect our rights in the more modern versions of Mickey Mouse and other works that remain subject to copyright.
Since writing the paper, I have watched this video from Andrew Morris, which covers how Disney is currently redesigning Mickey to look more like older adaptations in an attempt to copyright those new old designs and associate them with the brand, which strengthens trademark cases. I will leave a link to that video below. I also read an NPR article which grabbed many interviews, including talking to former Disney Imagineer Ryan Harmon. You know, he's evolved so much and become more 3D and colorful. The man remembered anxious talks when he worked at Disney in the 1990s about the beloved iconic character eventually entering the public domain. The article continues with a comment from Kimbrew McLeod, a communications professor and intellectual property scholar at the University of Iowa.
That's not going to happen. What is going into the public domain is this particular appearance in this particular film. That means people can creatively reuse only the Mickey Mouse from Steamboat Willie, not the Mickey Mouse in the 1940 movie Fantasia, nor the one on Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, a kids' show that aired on the Disney Channel for a decade starting in 2006.
While navigating the public domain, it is very important to keep an eye on trademarks, as those will be your biggest blockades in using works from the past moving forward. The BBC article dives into this as well.
Disney still separately holds a trademark on Mickey as a brand identifier and a corporate mascot. That means there are still limits on how the public can use these images. What I cannot do is start making merchandise and the same kinds of products that Disney sells, so if I'm selling t-shirts with Mickey and Minnie on them, and someone seeing those t-shirts thinks erroneously that they're getting a Disney product when they're not, that's what trademark stops. So any use of Mickey Mouse that gives the impression he belongs to a brand other than Disney would still be a trademark issue.
Many more articles go into detail that since Steamboat Willie is a black and white cartoon, anyone using Mickey's new colors or using more modern versions of his eyes or including his gloves would be subject to breaking copyright. With a little corporate distrust and a broad artistic view, one could draw the conclusion that the goal of this narrative is to further defamiliarize the public with the use of the public domain, particularly before any of his iconic aspects make their way into public hands in just 2 short years. So how would a young artist go about using Mickey Mouse for their own creative works? The first step is to pay attention to history and not the immediate information set in front of us. For example, the vast majority of the articles do not disclose that the silent film of Plain Crazy or Galloping Gaucho are also in the public domain. Mickey's look evolved drastically between these 3 films, giving modern artists a much wider variety of characteristics to use, and some of the characteristics that seem out of reach now will be falling into our hands in 2 years. Let's start by analyzing Mickey's eyes over the course of the 3 films. In Plain Crazy, Mickey's eyes were defined with a border around the sclera and a black iris. This treatment shifts approximately 2 minutes into the Galloping Gaucho. The border disappears on Mickey's eyes, leaving borderless black dots, which continue through the film and into Steamboat Willie. Interestingly, a popular type of eye design called pie-cut eyes did not make an appearance in any of the 3 films or surviving advertisements from 1928. This feature became central to what is known as the ink blot cartoon style of that period. This feature does not find its way onto the big screen for some time, however it does arrive in print media in 1929, and is fully documented in the Mickey Mouse comics, which appear January 13th, 1930, and ran until July 29th, 1995. That means just looking at his eyes, the public will own all the iconic aspects of his grayscale debut by 2026. The article also states that since his gloves in modern signature colors do not appear in the 1928 films, those aspects are not open to the public. While the gloves do not appear in the main body of the film, they are visible in Steamboat Willie. The designed title screen that plays at the beginning of the movie is where the investigation should start. Contrary to the rest of the film, in the title sequence, Mickey's appearance more closely resembles his design from Playing Crazy's debut. However, what we must note is that he is indeed wearing his gloves in the title screen. Mickey is also sporting a hat, a cane, striped shorts, and large shoes. These traits also appear in posters and advertisements designed for print. Most notably, iWorks' poster design for the re-release of Playing Crazy features the gloves, and will enter the public domain in 2025. In my original research paper, I posed if we look at only the films, Mickey's color didn't appear until the band concert in 1935. That's when the studio had to choose what color to make his shorts. So a quick aside, while that is true in choosing of red, his actual Technicolor debut had him in green pants. This is the first Mickey Mouse cartoon ever made in color. It was made for the 1932 banquet for the 5th Academy Award, and was not officially shown in theaters, but if my math is right, Green Pants Mickey here will become public domain in 2027. But before film, colored print media existed. We do have early renditions of his iconic red shorts appearing in poster designs by iWorks as early as 1928, and according to D23, the official Disney fan club, Mickey's shorts had been both red and green in merchandise, but they were more often red, so the band concert decisively made red Mickey's signature color. Where does this leave artists in the modern day, if we want to use Mickey Mouse? Well, compiling research from the films, graphic design, and comics, media history paints a clear picture. Film and television megacorporations did not exist in iWorks and Disney's era like they did today. While corporations such as Disney would rather have artists forget how to use the public domain, modern culture has always included being able to expand upon the works of the past. Walt Disney is a prime example of this with his classic films based on the Grimm's fairy tales. Even Mickey was created as a replacement for a previous idea, being Oswald the Rabbit. It makes sense that a corporation would want to hold on to their assets. This is a historical time in which animators and graphic designers can rebel against the misinformation laid out by Disney and news outlets. All it takes is a little corporate distrust and a little research into animation, graphic design, and comics to get a real idea of what is to come. And that's where the paper information ended. All of that being said, I am not a lawyer, and many artists do not have access to one easily. Disney has an endless amount of resources for their legal team, so trying to directly use Mickey as he appears in those films may not be the best call, especially as they create new versions of the character that reference old character designs to strengthen the trademark brand ties between the two. If you want a legal perspective on it, I would recommend the Legal Eagles video on the topic that will be linked below. Apparently, there are theoretical ways to argue newer versions of Mickey are derivative works because of the originality requirements for new copyright. It's a fascinating video and I recommend it. It would be a complete disservice for me to try and relay any of that information to you myself. So in my personal and professional opinion, I think every artist can and should use Mickey Mouse in their works. While it is an undeniable risk to use this, I think there are many people familiar with this trend. Now, I will not get into any notes about quality, but I think that's irrelevant to this point. I have not watched Blood and Honey myself, only seen the kill count. Horror is a very popular take when modern characters, popular with children, enter the public domain. Likely the easiest way to do it, because these are clearly not related to Disney's brand. While someone may see this and associate it with the character, they are not associating it with the Disney brand identity, and thus makes it safe from copyright infringement. So when using these public domain characters, you have to make them yours. It's not just the character, it's the story, the music, the idea of the art. When Disney made The Little Mermaid, based on Hans Christian Andersen's story, they didn't make a one-to-one adaptation. If they did, we would have seen Prince Eric marry a different princess that he believed to have saved his life from the sea, and leave Ariel the choice of either killing him and letting his blood drip on her legs so her fins would return and she could live a full 300 years as a mermaid, or let herself turn into sea foam and cease to exist because mermaids don't have souls, only for her to pick the second one, preferring herself to die than hurt the man she loves. Only for the surprise ending of her waking up as an ethereal spirit that is allowed to do good deeds for the next 300 years in exchange for an immortal soul that'll let her arise to heaven. So, if you have an original character or multiple characters, you could theoretically now make your own version of Steamboat Willie's story with your characters, like animation memes, if you're familiar with that, or every Disney princess movie. You could do a live-action thriller movie inspired by the Galloping Gaucho. You could put Mickey and company in your own style. An endless wealth of possibility. If you're me, you could think back on your personal experience as a college student when your college hired a Disney guy right out of the studio to be the animation chair. He wasn't a bad guy, you just didn't know enough about him to justify your ick. There was always something a little bit unsettling about how he walked into a room. You know, me being someone who wasn't very fond of Disney as a corporation, it was unsettling how he would walk into the back of a classroom and just stand there watching us, earning him the not so very affectionate nickname between a few of my friends as the Mouse. And with my project All-Nighter Survival Guide being about an animation student who pulls too many all-nighters, it seemed incredibly intuitive to enlist fellow SCAD alumni Salem Poulin in the endeavors of making a Tumblr sexy man Mickey to be the animation chair, imagining him to be a washed-up version of himself from the 1920s. It was common sense to seek out voice actor David Myers and his transatlantic accent. The point being, we as artists and designers are able to transcend and expand upon these works. And that's my soapbox. If you like this video, I've done others like it, and if you don't mind 6 years difference in maturity, they will be linked in a playlist below. If you're interested in All-Nighter Survival Guide, or just this weird Mickey I have, you can check out his first appearance in the visual novel demo Snowfell in the Shattered Glass, inspired by Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen, linked down below from my itch.io page. Or, later this summer, you can see him in the animated short Addressing the Public Domain on the All-Nighter Survival Guide YouTube channel. If you made it to the end, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope you have a wonderful day.